open the room. The audience are coming in now. A few more minutes, just a few seconds, and we'll get started. Okay, let's get started now. Good afternoon, audience. Thank you all so very much for joining us again for another session of our web talk series, Fashion Futures. We're very happy that you're joining us. This afternoon is pretty special. We have some amazing panelists here. But before we get to introduce to the actual panelists, I want to show a very short video just to kind of set the precedence for this afternoon's conversation. Bear with me 1 second as I share my screen. Bear me 1 second, guys. There we go. And here we are. Check out the sound. Thanks. Here we are.
By themselves, but if each person starts to make small changes, it's like a revolution. The situation is bad. Fashion is currently the second biggest polluter of the planet after oil. Obviously, we've all got a part to play, from the manufacturers of fabrics to the consumer. There is responsibility to think about how you buy them and how you dispose of them and how you make them and all of that. I think it's time for people to take action in their own lives. If we could all make like little changes, no one has to be perfect, it really will make a massive impact on the planet. There's no time like the present to get started, so we might have to start now.
Fast fashion is the production of an unnecessarily large amount of garments. Fast fashion is out. It's about looking after what we have, thinking about what already exists. You don't have to give up your glamour to be sustainable. There are things that have already been made that we can continue to enjoy in a healthy way. Don't buy less necessarily, buy smarter or buy kinder. It literally sometimes is putting your money where your mouth is. It's not about being perfect, it's just about being better. Do less harm, do more good.
80% of the carbon footprint of any item is post-purchase. When I think about how can I look after that item more sustainably, it's refurbishing and darning and mending, giving that item like a new lease of life. Washing at a cooler temperature is important because 90% of the energy that washing machines use goes on heating up the water. I'm a champion of air drying to know that, okay, I've washed my clothes, but the byproduct of me washing these clothes is not going to be harmful to an external environment outside of me. It's just a win-win situation.
95% of the clothing that we chuck away could have a second life, and we've just got into this throwaway culture. It's really, really detrimental to the planet. If you're sick of what you've got, see if any of your friends like it. When it comes to like underwear and things, you will need to recycle that. Depop's a really sustainable way to move on from clothing that you don't want because it's keeping it from landfills. Anyone can do it, literally anyone.
Fashion is there to make you feel good, and through the search for ease and convenience, we've kind of lost that sense of human instinct, which leads to creativity. If you've got something that's got a stain on it, make a deal out of it. Like, you know, make it an obvious stain or make it intentional. Take something that's already in existence and change it to make something new. So we're going to bag it up, we're going to put it in the back of a van, take it to the venue, then at the event people can either knit or darn some jeans, or they can like patch something up. It's definitely trendy now. In the future it will be there, but we won't talk about it. It will just be a given.
Very cool. Give me one more video, guys. And this is just a small snippet of a conversation from someone I think we'll all recognize.
I think really what everybody is thinking about right now is, you know, what is fashion when we emerge? What is the fashion show? And I think the most important thing to remember, and I think that's what Andrew's exhibition celebrates, is that we need creativity. And I know you were talking to Marc Jacobs the other day,
Yeah.
and I think creativity in times of crisis is really what is such an important beacon, I think, to all of us.
Yeah. I mean, they cancelled the men's shows, obviously, in June, and they've cancelled the couture. I mean, what's going to be like this crisis, how's going to affect the shows going forward, period? Like,
I think that's what everybody is thinking about. I mean, I think we don't know is the real answer, Naomi, but I think that we are all in agreement that, you know, we need to show less, that we need to have more of an emphasis on sustainability, there's no question, and we need to have more of an emphasis on luxury and creativity and craft, and that we need to celebrate the art of fashion and the design of fashion, and maybe we just need to all slow down and enjoy it much more and not always be saying what's new, what's next. I mean, you and I have worked in this business for a long time, and I think that.
So there you have it, audience. Those two videos set the precedence for what is to come in this afternoon's conversation. We have designers, we have experts in the field of technology, we have experts in the field of understanding the value chain of how sustainability and ethics translates right down across the actual hierarchy of the trading structure, when, say, in Africa or just anywhere, can apply anywhere in the world. We have panelists here who will be talking about the transition from moving from being a traditional designer into embracing technology and what that meant in terms of the panelist's career and professional ambition and how the reward that has come from that. But before I continue and go too far in depth into the actual depth of the discussion, I want to take this time to introduce each and every one of the panelists who are very important in the conversations that we're having today, and are doing incredible work in ensuring that sustainability and ethics takes precedence when dealing with conversations that has to do with the future of fashion. We will start with the lady herself of Victoria Grace, the founder and CEO, Jennifer. Please, Jeff.
Well, Michael, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer. I'm happy to be here. I'm the founder of Victoria Grace Fashion. We are an ethical and obviously sustainable brand. You will find out more about that, and I'll tell you more about how we stay sustainable and how we try and stay stylish and successful living in Togo, Africa. So I hope to discuss further.
Terence?
Hello, everyone. My name is Terence Eben. I am creative director of Never Fade Factory. We are a futurism concept space in Soho, which, as we know, is the heart of creativity, at least for Europe, if not globally. And our innovation has simply been creating an ecosystem where we are actually infusing ethics, we are actually infusing humanity as one of the principles or basis for the creativity in the first place. And how we've tried to do that is creating an online and an offline community. And the time cannot be more fitting for what we see as solutions through technology for sustainable fashion.
Thank you, Terence. Leroy.
Thank you for inviting me. Right, my name is Leroy Smith. I'm CEO of Direct Right TV. We specialize in experiential and research and development in immersive technology. Our main areas that we're dealing with is mainly to do with entertainment, and our first part of entertainment is fashion. So we're kind of heavily involved in that as well. Obviously, we're doing other things like music, theatre, dance. We're trying to kind of create an immersive environment, or trying to introduce the kind of like XR technology, as they call it today, within the kind of like creative industry, especially with those that are independent. There you go.
Thank you, Leroy. Adeyinka?
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Adeyinka, and I'm from the Henley Business School, where I'm a lecturer in organizational behavior and also double up as the deputy director of studies in the department there. My focus over the past couple of years, well, about 6 years now, has been understanding ethics across different industries. And from my observations across different industries and the trends we're seeing, particularly the intersection and interface of technology and how that's changing the landscape, as well as the shifting tastes in consumer behavior, and all of that have kind of informed some of my approach and attitude to research and investigations in that field. So it's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and looking forward to a great conversation with everyone.
Thank you, Adeyinka. Christopher.
Well, yes, thank you, Michael, and your team for inviting me, and everyone in the audience. I actually have had kind of a diversified career, starting out in urban planning and architecture, and then I ended up going to MIT in the media lab to expand into new technologies and building in more environmental we call it sort of phenomenology of how environments and user experience and all of this comes together. I've just completed a book called Smart Cities and Artificial Intelligence, based on the convergence theory of many different forces coming together. And it's really all about the ecosystem as a self-generative and self-regulating system. So the current crisis we're in now, for example, if we had this more like a human body, which is self-regulating, or nature is self-regulating, then in a way, the problems that come up in systems can be somehow resolved within their own internal organism. So if the organism is healthy, obviously, I mean, part of the problem is that we are living in crowded areas. We have too much, production going on. It's not sustainable. So cities and environments around the world are not sustainable, and fashion plays a huge part of, how our lifestyle is influenced our behavior. So we're looking at now how wearable technology and city environments and interactivity with users could become more seamless and more sustainable and ethical. So I look forward to discussing this.
Excellent. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you. So, audience, what we have here is we have a panel of experts who are committed to doing whatever they can in helping the world, because at the end of the day, whatever affects Africa affects the world, whatever affects the UK affects the world, particularly when it comes to the impact it has on environmental issues, the impact that it has on economic issues in the respective countries, say, or on the continent of Africa. We'll focus on the continent of Africa for right now, and we'll see how the part that the responsibility that they've taken up in their respective companies in ensuring that they do their part to help out, because they realize that there is an extravagance that's taken over. They're taken over in terms of the appreciation from the standpoint of perspective of fashion, whereby there is the mass-produced and constant rush to get as much out as possible, and that has put a lot of tremendous strain on our environments, but also on the economy. And when we talk about the environment, we're not just talking about in terms of the climate change, but we're also talking about the impact that it's had on economies and communities, particularly communities. 80% of the population of the African continent actually use use clothing, and most of this used clothing comes from developed countries like the United States and the UK. But it just so happens that much of this clothing that's there, is that clothing that should have been given to landfills, but then it's actually been dumped in Africa. While, because of the number of people of living on the continent of Africa, used clothing does play a very important part in ensuring that everybody, we hope that everyone gets the, get clothed properly and have the sort of basic necessities in from that angle. Unfortunately, there's always been some major corruption that's happened as a result of that, whereby this market of secondhand clothing has caused a lot of problems for other local businesses that find a lot of that they're struggling, and governments who are trying to, perhaps across Africa, who are trying to do what they can to try to regulate, are finding that there's a problem whereby they might get sanctioned by the bigger countries for trying to protect their own local industries. So I want to start with the issue of the two designers that we have here today, Victoria Grace and Never Fade Factory, and what that has meant for them in terms of being able to address these issues in your businesses. Jennifer?
All right, thank you, Michael. I'm not sure whether you noticed, but I went offline. I did say earlier on that being in West Africa, one of our problems tends to be energy and connectivity. So I'm back on managing. If I understood you very well, you want me to tell you about how I stumbled across upcycling here in West Africa. Is that correct? Is that what you intended to hear?
What I would like for you to address for right now is how you took it upon yourself to ensure that your company, Victoria Grace, which is one of the most incredible brands in Togo right now, but across Africa, that's taking precedence in ensuring that that sustainable fashion is what it is that you promote, and you build your business based on sustainable fashion. How were you able to embrace it? Why did you start embracing sustainable fashion and your social consciousness that comes with that?
Well, it was actually, for me, it was a no-brainer, because we came across the stats, the United Nations Sustainability Development Goal, and we saw that we were all responsible for an unsustainable environment, the whole world, all of us. And then I found out that the biggest culprit, as we saw in the video, number one was oil, was the fashion industry. And that sort of changed everything. It changed. We had to change our strategy. We had to do something about it. We had to be part of a solution, not part of a problem. I didn't want to walk into a business and create a problem. So the whole concept changed, and we found that it was so much easier and far more interesting and innovative trying to solve a problem rather than to pile up on the trend that existed. And living in West Africa, it offers so much opportunity to work closely with the other stakeholders, with the locals, and maintain artisanal skills. And as you find out later on, stumble across an environmental catastrophe, that's, landfill, that was positioned both in Togo and in Ghana and around us. And more so, we have the deposit of dead stock. So fabrics that are no longer wanted, that have been cut up, and then they can't sell in the Western world, and they get dumped, I would say, in our local markets. And so we had material dumping that we could buy, dead stock, to remake clothes. So i.e., they gave us their polyester, their Roenne, we got everything sitting on the organic solution, which I do in Europe. In West Africa, we pick up the dead stock. We pick up the unwanted secondhand. They call dead man's clothing, right? We picked it up, and we found a way to upcycle it and have so much fun turning giving these pieces another life. And we found out that if you give it another life, it's 24% emissions. We save on emissions on each piece. We realized that we have actual data or stats to measure our success. Success becomes redefined, because we now know if I pick up a pair of jeans, that if it ends up in landfill, what it could do. If I turn it around, it has another life and it helps with emissions. And so we went ahead and did that. And as you see, we put some really beautiful pieces on the runway, and we work with the local women we find in the market where the fabrics or where the clothing has been dumped. And these women, you know, they've been working. Some of them have arthritic fingers. Some of them carry babies on their back while they're at the butterfly machine sewing away. And they've been there for 30 years on a stool, and they only earn enough money for the day. So we've decided, okay, these women have contributed to taking these clothes, giving it another life. We're going to be responsible for giving them a pension, you know, so that they can close out from their work with dignity. And so by that also became a creative angle for us. So we got even far more excited finding these pieces and then handing them over to them and working with them, paying them a living wage, and also preparing them for their pension. And so it's an excitable project that we have, even though we're in the midst of landfill, incinerator around the corner, and a lot of scrap on the floor. But we're picking them up and we're turning them around.
Thank you, Jennifer. There's so much that you said just now that I certainly want to, that I think is definitely worth us, you know, talking about, including this sort of, you know, what you do for the communities, helping these, the women in the community also. Even though some of them might be arthritic, like you said, in fingers, that they're still, you know, the work that you help to provide them, help to build their communities and help to provide for their own families, their respective families too. Terence, I want to come to you and ask the same question in terms of why you decided to embark on and have such a central focus of sustainability on the Never Fade Factory platform.
In the case of Never Fade Factory, it was born out of circumstance, maybe a bit more than out of consciousness, meaning that I started out as a brand, Never Fade London, which was, you know, the idea was to have a lot of social messaging. And one of the first issues we picked was the refugee crisis in Syria, which at the time was quite a big global catastrophe with people who cared about immigration. And being from sort of the environment that I knew people who were affected by it, my associate and I decided to choose a term or a slogan, "No one is illegal." And based off of this social message, we started the brand. And somewhere down the journey, after we acquired a space, very expensive space in Soho, we didn't have the capital per se to go and continue manufacturing or producing. And it just seemed like it was a more savvy business idea to produce one-off garments. So, you know, this idea of producing one-off garments and of having art, especially live art painted on garments, was kind of like the segue as a business solution of not having adequate capital to keep the brand alive. But then as we continued to grow, for me, it became even more natural, considering since maybe the age of 7, 8, 9 years old or so, I kind of made my own clothes, and I had handover clothes from my older siblings or from wherever they might have come from, and you appreciate them and you creatively, you know, spin them into something which is actually admirable. So with that in mind, then as we started to build a community of emerging creatives, my space was always open to fashion creatives, art creatives, techie creatives. And we realized that there was more commercial opportunity for everyone if we just upcycled vintage garments, because we seemed to build an attraction slowly but surely for people who were looking for one-off pieces and for upcycled vintage started coming to our store. And it helped that we were located right next to Supreme, to Palace, and to Machine A, which were all trendy stores that carried some of the more mainstream commercial items. But then that crowd always got very curious about what we made, because it was, you know, it was not mainstream. It was a bit off or alternative. So this was how the journey for my platform started when it comes to sustainable fashion. But then sustainable fashion has so many definitions when you start breaking it down in terms of what kind of textile you're using, in terms of where it's manufactured, whether it's made by hand, et cetera, et cetera. And again, with fashion, because everything is so PR driven, I did not want to find myself in a situation where whatever route of sustainable fashion we've chosen is questioned. So we definitely honed in or zeroed in on the opportunity of vintage upcycling. And I've spent a lot of time over the years. I must have sold easily, I would say, 40,000 pounds worth of military upcycle garments in the last 3 years. Because this is obviously a style or a trend which has kept the idea of upcycling alive. A lot of people like military and camouflage, et cetera, et cetera. So I think for most people even people don't like to use vintage clothes, this is one of the areas where they make an exception to wear camouflage or vintage military inspired clothing. With the recent sort of seamlessly moving into the fourth industrial revolution, where we know that technology and innovation is going to play a leading role in switching things around and providing some solutions even for fashion sustainability, then we added more techies to our community. And what the techies have done have brought in more 3D design, more the idea of concept clothing, and then we are exploring things like artificial intelligence, blockchain, with some futuristic companies that are now also tapping into fashion to see how we come up with different solutions within our ecosystem that we can experiment and then take them to market. So it's been an interesting transition for us where, it was not a conscious idea to go into fashion sustainability. I would not sit here and say that I had some grandiose plan of becoming the leading fashion sustainability, platform, because there wasn't. It happened because you could see, as Dr. Adeyinka identified earlier, there is a consumer awareness that has changed. And as you know for yourself, with creativity, you cannot produce things that the market doesn't want. If fashion sustainability has not been a hot topic up till now, it's simply because the consumers were not really interested before. There was not necessarily a market for it, and you can't impose it on them. But now that climate change becomes more of an issue, now that having a virtual reality sort of identity for lifestyle and fashion becomes something exciting and something pervasive within society, then yes, it makes it makes sense that there's a bigger consumer market for people like us to jump in and actually create businesses within the fashion industry based on being sustainable fashion establishments.
Thank you, Terence. Thank you so much. And in talking about in being aware of the impact that the fashion industry has on the environment, and by the way, the fashion industry is responsible for more than 10% of greenhouse gases. And at the end of the day, when you think of the huge detriment that it has on the environment, the countries that suffer the most are usually the developing countries. That's just what happens. And it just so happens when it comes to the dumping, that much of the dumping happens in developing countries. Much of it happens in Africa. And so that causes a huge issue. And when one becomes aware of that and understanding that there's the social responsibility in doing so, there comes the topic of ethics. And it's important for us to understand that in order for us to really think about if we're going to be promoting the continent of Africa and all its diversity and beauty and richness, if we are not aware of ethics and being very socially conscious about that, then all of those beautiful things, because of the climate, the climate change and the impact that it's having on, the sustainability within the actual in Africa, not just fashion, but in terms of people's lives and maintain people's lives, all of that will be destroyed. And so ethics become a huge part of that topic. And Adeyinka, I just want to come to you, and as an expert who is very much aware of the importance of ethics, can you please give us your input on that angle?
Thanks, Michael. And it's been great listening to Terence and Jennifer share their thoughts. And I think you both are doing incredible stuff in that space. And I was really just sitting down smiling and getting really inspired by the stories and the thoughts you've shared so far. Michael, to your point, I think the first thing we need to note is that whenever I'm speaking with entrepreneurs or people in any industry space, one of the things I tend to ask them is that, have you defined your entrepreneurial identity? It's a question I ask because I think we've reached a point in human history where in doing business, you're not just going to be doing business because you want to do business for business sake. We're not going to do that anymore. There's now a huge clarion call for us to begin to infuse consciousness into the way we do business. So when you talk about ethical business or sustainable fashion, the way to phrase this is to call it fashion with conscience, so to say. And if you're looking at fashion with conscience, you tend to look at it in two big blocks. You tend to look at it from the production side of things, and you also tend to look at it from the consumer side of things. And everything else that goes in between that implies that it's a collective multi-stakeholder agenda, and it's a collective multi-stakeholder responsibility. And I think that's probably the biggest message we need to pass across. And let me switch a little bit and talk about maybe some of the behaviors we found and trends we've discovered across the decades. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, and into the early 90s, hand downs were very popular things going on in different families, in the middle class and in the lower class, even in the upper class. You had a lot of hand downs from your brothers. I remember very clearly that the only times I got new clothes growing up was during Christmas and maybe during birthdays. Every other thing that happened in between, including school uniforms I used, were handed down to me by my older siblings. And the shoes that we got were not shoes that were thrown away. They were shoes that we took to the cobbler and were refurbished and were given a new lease of life, and we put them back on. And you change the sole when the sole is gone. And I remember my father used to say to me, you don't need to get a new pair of shoes. We need to put life into these old ones. And I used to think he wasn't making a lot of sense until I grew older and then realized that those practices have given way for what we now call fast fashion, where you just pick up clothes and after 3 months you're done with them. You just kind of dispose of them anyhow without trying to even take responsibility for how you dispose of them. So like I was saying, so there's these two big blocks, the production side of things, and there's the consumer side of things, and there's that collective responsibility. But I think for me, the biggest thing to submit to this esteemed audience this afternoon is that we need to think about ethical fashion as pretty much a tagline that says you need to source things responsibly, you need to make them sustainably, and you need to make them fairly, as well as consume and dispose responsibly. I think that's pretty much the tagline that summarizes the entire focus of what ethical fashion is. Now, what that means in different spaces can then be teased out into greater detail. And finally, maybe I would say this, as I said earlier, that if we wanted to look at, if I wanted to give another framework to kind of capture the whole thought around ethical fashion, is to probably use the traditional sustainability model that talks about people, planet, and profit. Those three big blocks, again, can speak to both the production side of things and the consumer side of things. So for instance, if you look at the people side of things, you want to look at issues like sweatshops. So like Jennifer was saying, there are many organizations and many businesses that use artisans for cheap and make 700, 1,000% profit off of cheap labor and never look back at where those things have come from with a view to giving them a better life. And you look at artisan management, for example, that's another thing. So you look at upskilling the people who help you do your stuff. You look at elements of skills transfer, how you take people and put them in spaces where they never thought was possible and give them new skills. You have elements on the planet of using, like, so let's talk about even supply of exotic animals. And everything I'm saying seems simplistic, but in each of these blocks are heavy debates that have been going on in the literature for the past 10 to 15 years. If you look at sweatshops, for example, and look at how we have a lot of children working in sweatshops in different emerging economies in Nigeria, in so many parts of the world, the debate has always been that big time European or Western organizations or fashion houses use these guys for cheap, bring them to the West, put a lot of profit on them, and make a kill on those clothes. And the turnaround is always that, why do you want to make children work? But when you go to those countries, as we have done, and speak to the people working in those sweatshops, the first thing they tell you is the child needs to eat as well. And so don't even bring in the element of the child should not be working in a factory. That's number one. There's a cultural side of it that says the child is a part of the family and has to be responsible for food coming into the house. So the child has to put their own skin in the game. So when you look at all these behavioral nuances playing out, you discover that it's never going to be black and white. It's always going to be gray, and therefore calls for us to really unpack all these issues contextually. And that's the only way for us to begin to understand or tease out, the ethical issues and the ethical challenges in all of those spaces. So finishing off on the whole concept of entrepreneurial identity, for anyone on this call, I always say so I mentor a lot of startups, and I coach a lot of startups in different industries. And when I take them through this whole idea of identity, one of the things I tend to ask them is, who do you want to be in business? Do you want to be a purely commercial business, or do you want to be a purely philanthropic business, or do you want to go right in the middle and be a hybrid that kind of has a mixed motive, and whereby you play along what we call the social enterprise route? Now, a bit more finer definition is that if you choose to be a social enterprise, it's one thing. If you choose to be a socially responsible business, it's another thing. Now, I'm throwing out all these technical details because they mean different things, and there is really no harm in trying to position yourself in these different blocks. What really matters more is that we stay responsible to the people who are working with us and to the process, and staying committed to the planet and also to the entire world as a whole. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Adeyinka. I mean, you so clearly pointed out that, when you look at the supply chain, that every single person in that supply chain, from the manufacturer to the consumer, has a role to play. There's a social responsibility, and they must take that responsibility to heart if they're going to save this planet, but also to save ourselves, save our communities, and being able to give back to ensure that our communities are not left from the profit that's made from the extravagance in sales, and that's very important. Christopher, I would like to come to you because you specialize in an area of AI, artificial intelligence, and use technology to really be able to understand people's behavior and addressing some of the issues regarding sustainability in the fashion industry. And it's an area that I think a lot of people are not really, even the designers would appreciate very much if you would just expound on that so that we can have a broad understanding.
Well, I wanted to bring up, so building on the other speakers, what they've all said, I think Jennifer and Terence and Adeyinka have mentioned aspects that relate to what I've been talking about as kind of the evolution of each market. And like there was a book I've been teaching called The 7 Cultures of Capitalism that was written in 1990s. But it's interesting that the Scandinavian countries are going back towards basic kind of development. For example, I mean, they only use glass for consumer, beverages. All the beer companies that were in Scandinavia are now, and there's mostly home brewing and homegrown products. So they're trying to produce locally, and they're trying not to import anymore, and they reduce their carbon footprint. So that's, maybe Scandinavian countries are the most developed in a sense that they've already gone through development. They've solved problems of poverty, and pretty much equality, social equality is sustainable in those countries. I don't know how sometimes they do it economically, but they seem to be able to manage. So in other developing countries and countries in Africa that are still not yet at that stage of social equality, I think what Adeyinka just mentioned about, some people's jobs are, their livelihood for the family. So to call it a sweatshop and just write it off from political agenda is not solving the problem, from sort of the grassroots level. And what I would like to talk a second about is one example. I worked a lot in Pakistan, and I found this amazing. I gave a speech there, which was that I went to some markets in Pakistan, in Karachi, where you can find every part of electronic devices that were thrown, that in America would be thrown out in 1 second. It'd be done in 3 months. You'd throw that out. You could find mobile phones, cell phone parts from Japan, from Russia, from Korea, that go back 20 years. And they are the only place I could go. Like if you have an old piece of equipment, it could be a typewriter, it could be anything. a software piece. So my lecture to the software engineers in Karachi was, wow, what if the software industry created that same kind of, let's say, spectrum that they're doing in the physical electronics market in the software space? Because every software device has a kind of life cycle, but some people still have software or hardware devices that are 5 years old that in the very, let's say, wasteful cultures like America, where I come from, we would just buy a new thing right away and throw it out. And so what happens to that? Well, those end up in Africa or in Pakistan. So I think the idea to bring out the culture of the marketplace, which can almost leapfrog the whole technological space and go to really a kind of new space of grassroots recycling and reuse in a new creative way, in defining a market that no one else is after that space. I think that's what Terence, you talked about. And I think, Jennifer, your case, we have to be careful that, we don't lose the people, because sustainability for me is not about the environmental issues as much as it about being sustainable to keep people employed, to have opportunities, to allow people to, have some profit in their life. If that doesn't occur, then no one's going to have a consciousness. You can't achieve consciousness if you're starving and you don't have opportunities. So I think we need to bring back the kind of grassroots approach, make that the industry focus, make that the creative space, which I think some of the speakers are talking about. And for me, the technology is less important as the people and the technology of people. But I'll just end on the point of, in the tracing right now, contact tracing idea in the corona epidemic here, the idea of tracing and recycling, and idea of RFID, and being able to track every garment from origin to end use should be how we be able to create this kind of collective intelligent marketplace where we track, and it doesn't cost a lot to embed those very small devices or chips or whatever will be in the future, that we will be able to track that, and we'll be able to then do data analytics, and we can then understand the behavior and patterns of where things end up. So I'm just opening up a lot of points. I didn't answer all the questions maybe, but I wanted to talk about 3 points. It's about each country has their own DNA, as Adeyinka was talking about, and we have to build it on that. We can't just expect that we appropriate other cultures and technologies that don't fit that environment. And 2, I think we have to think about sustainability first in terms of jobs, in terms of a marketplace that can sustain people, rather than thinking about it purely from an altruistic point of view when people don't have the opportunity to achieve that yet. So turn it back to you. Thank you for.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you. I mean, the understanding from your point of, particularly when you mentioned the whole, that you would think, anyone would think, oh, we're sending used clothes to Africa or used clothes to Latin America, to, less privileged countries. And you think, oh, it's so altruistic. But, and they use the tag repurposed, whether it being clothes or electronics. But at the end of the day, quite a lot of that is a lot of waste also. And a lot of waste that then causes a lot of issues, whereby it is not, that in itself is not sustainable, because then it affects a lot of other, different aspects of social life, and that's really important. It affects the economy, it affects so many different things. Leroy, I want to come to you because I know you have been in the fashion industry for quite some time, even though right now the majority of your focus is pretty much on, majority of the work that you do is very technology based and doing incredible work in terms of using technology across the creative industry. I wanted to hear your transition from being in fashion and how, and you seeing the sort of very futuristic trend in fashion and having to accept, I have to move on from traditional fashion into technology. Tell us about about that, please.
Sure. My transition from fashion to technology is quite simple. I come from a background of kind of the urban scene where, for instance, I was involved in music. Fashion, I'll come back to fashion, but I was involved in music. But within the music industry, obviously everything had to be done through through network. So in regards to the network, you find yourself a platform in regards to distribution and all those kind of things. So when you now look at the fashion industry now, they both kind of walk hand in hand, because if you don't have that support mechanism to kind of move forward or to sell your items or to sell your records, okay, there's no real platform for that urban creative scene, okay. When technology started to come in, there's a massive confusion between technology and how the urban scene was to use that, because everyone was relying on distribution. So therefore now, you know, when you're talking about, oh, you've got to go online, you've got to put your catalog online, you've got to do all this, no one really understood, okay? So in regards to what gave me the idea to what I was doing, I actually set up an internet kind of like, we did a pilot for internet TV show, okay? This is back in 2002. And just to see how I can use the internet to set a platform for that urban scene. It was more of an experimental element, but it did actually work, because the hits that we got, which we couldn't afford to pay for, because back in those days, broadband, you had to pay for it, okay? So the bigger the broadband, the more expensive it was. So back in those days, it was quite difficult, but the fact is we actually made a point in regards to, you know, transitional from kind of like being involved with the internet scene, crossing over towards technology. It actually works. We started sort of live broadcasting and streaming online at Graduate Fashion Week. This is back in 2005. And basically in regards to kind of like how that kind of transitioned from bringing a wider audience to your collection, I mean, that's something else that we, you know, that we found exciting. Now, moving on from there again, okay, we kind of like did an experimental thing with Fashion Scout, obviously during London Fashion Week. We took on 3 designers and we kind of like used, we said, okay, we need to market this through your social platform. So they all actually kind of agreed with this. So basically what we did, we marketed everything, their shows through the social medias with schedules marked. We wanted to find out how many people would actually remember or actually log on to a live fashion show. Now, the good thing about this thing as well, we did it in 360. Okay, which is another kind of like element to which we used in regards to bringing a new visual experience to kind of like broadcasting, and also given a new element to sort of like test to see how this would work for the Gen Z millennium generation, because the Gen Z generation are more into the technology these days. They have more information, they have more enthusiasm to get involved, because you've got all, you know, TikTok, you've got all these kind of like IGTV, everything's out there now. So in regards to kind of like, you know, the transition from me to get over to technology was quite easy. When you look at an independent element, okay, and you look at the corporate industry, it's kind of like, what I see with technology, it brings the game a level species, okay? I mean, everything's level now. So it's up to the creative or the independent now to look at what they're doing and say, okay, how can I contribute towards or put my story across, okay? Because everything's now down to numbers. Okay, so if Coca-Cola had 10,000 hits on their advert and I got as an independent, because my creativity within using technology was that good, I got 20,000 hits. So therefore, for me, that's, you know, that to me is a major transitional stage for any independent or any creative person to look at technology and go, okay, this is good for me. This is an independent element. I can actually then, you know, have a better chance of setting up my own business online, which would mean, sorry, I'll keep moving on, but which would mean, okay, changing your business model for online business. Okay, there's no question about that. And the exciting thing for me for crossing over, I realized this about 10 years ago. Okay, but it was really too early to try and sell that idea to anybody, because obviously internet technology was a new thing, everyone's getting excited about stuff, but at the end of the day, my experiments, my experiential elements that I've had, and my collaborations that I've had with other tech companies has opened my eyes into how this would actually work. Now, we've been working over the last couple of years in regards to creating or looking into a kind of like a virtual environment. Okay. Now, we did a documentary.
Leroy, but before you get into that, the virtual experience, because I think what you mentioned there was so important, because there is a challenge for brands that are, you know, that are focused on sustainability, upcycling, and deconstruction to compete with, because you still, at the end of the day, there is a market. It is, you're in the fashion industry. I'm going to direct this at Victoria Grace and Never Fade Factory, where there is still a competition with the bigger brands, or not even just bigger brands, but other brands who are not focused on sustainability and not as and even though in their actual business model they will say there's an element of ethics in there and social and a clear understanding of social responsibility, when you look at what they're producing, and it certainly doesn't measure up. And right now, as Adeyinka said, when you look at the supply chain of things, that the consumer does have a responsibility in holding companies, holding these companies, these fashion companies responsible for, in ensuring that that is upheld. And the video that we showed in the very beginning, some of these very young emerging designers mentioned that, right now, fast fashion is out, that people, especially younger consumers, are much more environmentally conscious than ever before. So for Jennifer and Terence, I want to ask you guys, while there is using the technology to promote your business, whether it being on social media, creative an amazing interactive website, how challenging has it been for you guys in trying to compete with other brands that just the challenge in itself? I just want to not other brand, but the challenge in trying to compete in the market when you are promoting sustainability and ethics as your main focus. Jennifer?
Yes, okay. Well, of course, that is the question that everybody wants to hear. If there are a couple of designers or, independent designers or emerging designers watching, that's the big question. And I would say that's how I feel. Rome was never built in a day, right? And this movement, this revolution that we're in, it's going in a positive direction. And if you don't get on the bandwagon now, right? If you don't jump on and join in the upcycling, recycling, reuse, and all the re-rolls, there's so many re's, and be kind. If you don't jump and remodel your business now, then there won't be a story. The big companies are being challenged. The watchdogs are out there. We have amazing activists and advocates out there. I mean, this COVID-19, I spent my entire time just listening to awesome advocates and
Okay.
Sorry guys, Jennifer is having, she's in Togo, and right now she's having some internet connection issues, and so please bear with her.
Activists out there across the world streaming on. It is about the youth growing. So this is so I say Rome is not built in a day. We are in the planning process. We are being creative, and we are coming from our hearts. It's about being kind. It's about being responsible and transparent. We're using social media to be transparent. We're probably not getting as many hits as the big companies are, but still, Instagram doesn't grow overnight unless you cheat. So, you have to take one step at a time and stay on the course, be kind.
Pardon me, guys.
Be responsible, be transparent. Stakeholders, the shareholders, supply chain, we're intertwined, whether technology. Find other ways. I am looking at technology from the, using fabrics that are now going to be able to, you can track the source from dirt to cloth. And that is available to us. So, it's available for us to use those fabrics where the consumer can track and look at. There could be a QPR on the label that says, you just scan it and it tell you all about that fabric. And these are things that we are looking at, and we have a lot of information out there. So that will determine how successful we are going to be. And we will see success. We hang in there. And that's what I believe.
Absolutely, absolutely. Terence, Never Fade Factory, because I know in addition to answering the question in how Never Fade Factory sort of addresses the issues of competition, I know for you guys, a big part of what the Never Fade Factory does also is mentoring young designers who are wanting to pursue that's the similar focus of ensuring that their brand is being socially conscious and is being environmentally friendly and still be competitive and make a living from it. So how does Never Fade Factory deal with those sort of challenges?
Well, I think we've been kind of in this space of social impact as a way of business. I guess they call it social enterprise, this domain, from our inception. We've never started a brand if my associates and I didn't have this determination to create a messaging board using fashion as the vehicle for it. And so it kind of organically, for us at least, happened that we created this ecosystem where futurism, in this case for us 3 years ago, futurism for sure included fashion sustainability. It included fashion technology. And within my sort of ecosystem, only in the last year, then I started to add on, some young kids who have virtual reality games that are focused on using their virtual space to commercialize fashion. In this case, one of them actually owns his own fashion brand. So in launching his fashion brand, his brand philosophy and business strategy is mapped out around his virtual reality game being successful. So I have, I don't know, easily 10, 15 young people within my ecosystem who have come into this space so they can experiment with this new awareness or consciousness, as again, Dr. Adeyinka was pointing out, that there needs to be a relationship between consumer behavior and creativity. And so when you have ecosystems like what I built, then you can observe that behavior, right? Because we interact very closely with the consumers that we have. We have a fixed sort of destination space we've created because our items are very unique. So, the same consumer or customer will come in at least twice a month on a minimum. And that gives you an opportunity to watch and observe their behavior. We play a small role as a think tank for WGSN, which is a trend forecasting company for the fashion industry, always at least implanted in our business strategy an aspect which is about analyzing consumer behavior. And because of this, I think we were always kind of aligned with this fourth industrial revolution. Fair enough, as a leader of the troop, I did not do all I could in my ability to create as strong as an online platform as I did offline. And it's in this lockdown period then I've taken advantage, again, as leadership should restructure, to create a bit more energy around the offline activities, to reflect the narrative that was already happening within the physical concept space. And so when someone like Anna Wintour says, well, we don't know what will come out of this, I disagree. They know what is going to come out of this. The current situation has the industry perturbed because they were more driven by the business of fashion. And okay, we're all guilty because we all played the game. Nobody was trying to throw any alarms anywhere, really. We were, but not on the scale we could have as companies, individuals, or community. So the fashion industry knows, they are aware that fashion sustainability is something that's in demand by consumer behavior. So you must respond to it or you will lose. So don't put out any more advertising, which is only geared towards self-grandizement. It's not going to work anymore, not for most consumers. There's going to be a very minimal percentage that will go for that sort of advertising or marketing strategy. They know they need to respond differently, and the fashion industry has done so with the first instance of combining men's and women's fashion week here in London in June, because there was actually no reason to have a men's fashion week separate from a women's fashion week. There was really no reason other than trying to grow and expand the business and the revenue that's generated through it. So here in London, I think Never Fade Factory is positioned within or aligned within where the industry is growing into. I do know that we fell short of, again, putting that narrative online properly.
Okay. And by the way, guys, audience, we're very happy to say that the Never Fade Factory is one of AFWL's partners. So that's a wonderful thing. And of course, Victoria Grace has always been with us and has been very much one of the big brands on the Africa Fashion Week London, catwalk shows, and not just in London, but also in Nigeria. And so thank you so much, Jennifer, for helping us to very much show our example in certainly supporting brands that whose focus is based on sustainability and ethics. And the FWL platform continues to work very hard in promoting such brands. Christopher, I wanted to ask you, in terms of artificial intelligence and how that can be used to help the brands like that are like the Victoria Grace and Never Fade Factory, because at the end of the day, the competition is very stiff out there. And oftentimes, because there are not so many of them, the impact is not as huge, and it's harder to, and makes it more difficult to compete with other brands. How can one use the artificial intelligence in shifting and changing consumer behavior towards such brands? 1 second, Christopher. There you go.
That's an amazing question, Michael. I think part of the first challenge would be for smaller companies to have access to AI. That's the first challenge, because we might have the idea we want to use AI, but then how are we going to, put together a team that could support what we're doing? So I think the first question is identifying how we want to use it, which I think different speakers have been talking about, matching consumers with consumer demand and consumer wants. So it's got to come from both sides. So we have to basically use AI to be able to help us facilitate how we read the patterns and trends of consumer behavior without necessarily being invasive, because that's the big issue. The big topic now is about being invasive. We don't want to necessarily get into people's very personal lives in terms of what their preferences are. I think because we know that there's certain prejudices that come out of that, and actually we may even lose consumer opportunities because we somehow generalize on consumer patterns. So I think AI can help us to figure out how to match those together. Machine learning will be the tool that allows us to continually rewrite the code so that the algorithms that help us to figure out how to match consumer with product or brand will continually evolve based on the more data that comes in. The machine learning can continue becoming more intelligent. So I think the smaller companies need to get into that space to actually be able to connect to their consumers much in a way leapfrogging the big consumer brands that may be more broadcasting. Well, then I think dealing more with, I would say, new grassroots, social media ecosystems that create new communities that support the same values, that want to be part of a community. I'm talking a lot in my book, and now we're talking about creating a new social capital where maybe the new currency will be a new form of exchange. So maybe we barter clothes for services. Maybe we have a new community where we're not using cash anymore to exchange. I think the future now, since a lot of people will be out of jobs and there's a lot of problems of currency and flow, is that people can now start sharing ideas as currency and start sharing the new mediums of design, fashion, and resources in a different way. So AI can also support those platforms. So I hope that gives some idea on your question.
And as Leroy mentioned earlier about how his transition from being in the fashion industry traditionally and really embracing technology and particularly using the internet as a way of really taking the business and recognize that the business has to really embrace the internet. Correct me if I'm wrong, Christopher, that the more businesses like the Victoria Grace and the Refugee Factory being online and being able to generate activities online, it helps companies and experts like yourself who specialize in AI to be able to track consumer behavior and be able to also kind of direct them towards such companies. Am I right?
Yes, especially I think I like the term glocal. Glocal is the key word for me, because everyone's looking for local experiences and local characteristics that let's say in Africa, in each country, in each environment, in each city, there's so much richness that happens that can be brought into global context. So the global connectivity through the AI, through recognizing an internet and bringing it all together, is what I think is going to allow smaller companies to become part of global networks. And that's the key. That can only happen through the internet, really, the Internet of Things. So the more that we can plug into that, and it doesn't really take a lot, but I think, as Jennifer said, you have to start somewhere and you have to build it step by step. It's not like you all of a sudden become, expanded on massive networks, but those viral networks start to connect to other viral networks. And that's really like kind of, I like it, like use the word neural network, that our brain is connecting and this synapses is firing on all different neurons of connecting things together. So we need to be out there firing the cylinders, to be out there.
Yes.
Part of the collective intelligence. Yes.
Thank you. And Leroy, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going on the basis of the individual elements, because I'll try to finish off as quickly as possible the first time around, but time ran out for me. So, in regards to how technology can actually work, is that I find that the technology is more advantageous to your creatives, your independent creators, than it is to the corporate industry. That's my feel on it. And basically, in regards to, you talk about ethics, you talk about sustainability, you talk about ecology, okay? You talk about the Gen Z millennial generation. I mean, these are the generations that understand exactly what's going on out there. So in regards to sending out a message through technology, whether you use fashion or not, okay, is a way of transforming that message across. Now, fashion, yes, we do have an issue with that. So at the end of the day, I work with a lot of graduate students, and I'm looking to ensure how to use technology for their own gain, being an independent artist, okay, and not to be scared of the situation of having a corporate industry selling something and you can't compete, because you can compete. So it's all about kind of like collaborative elements with those tools you do not have. So if you don't have the tools in regards to augmented reality or virtual reality and things like that, the collaborative element, that's how I got to where I am right now. I didn't know much about it either. But at the end of the day, I actually got my education up to point. I went to a lot of networking elements, and I spoke to like-minded people that are on the same tip of where does technology go next in fashion. And at the end of the day, we all have a common goal in regards to independency. So obviously with the situation around technology now, I believe, I'm hoping, put it this way, I'm hoping that the independent creative industry will latch onto the technology, which obviously will bring it completely forward. Can I just make one more point as well? Point I'm actually worried about is the corporate industry. There's going to be a social divide. Okay, the corporate industry at that moment in time, they work with B2B. Okay, and obviously their technology is made for that particular market, and we get what they call the cipher bit. It's been drained down. There's nothing really what to grab hold of. I want to ensure that the message is out there for independents to actually work within technology, because that is, I see, the only way forward now. We're not going back to a normal state. We can all admit that. We can all look at the situation where we have to readdress how we are, the way we work. Even our business model has to change. Okay, so at the end of the day, I'm trying to put across the importance of, getting involved with technology. Okay, seeing where it fits your product, seeing, the sustainability of it. You're looking at e-commerce that obviously Terence mentioned earlier on. That's obviously important. You mentioned Bitcoin. That's something that people can look at. Okay, there's lots of sustainable elements that can help, the sustainability and ethics. So, with Africa myself, I'm so excited about what's going on over there right now. If technology can be pushed, and if a pathway can be driven through from your corporate down to your, down to the educational level, okay, that's where the importance of technology can be taught and spread. And then if you're talking about bringing back, okay, our own kind of like resources and using that, then it has to be on the ground level. And if technology can get down there through a pathway, and then the pathway can go back the other way. So, it's really important that, we send that message, okay? Because that's the end goal, sending that message. Technology is there, and it's a level player.
Thank you, Leroy. I'm glad you mentioned that whole thing about the the ground level and how technology needs to filter through the ground level. And that's going to lead me to this, my next question to Adeyinka, who I asked him to please be on the panel to talk about the supply chain and how, I want to touch on two things there, Adeyinka. One, from what Christopher was talking about in terms of consumer behavior and how it changes consumer behavior and how that translates in the supply chain, but also what Leroy was talking about in regard to the need for that to trickle down, but how the ease at which that happens, but particularly on the continent of Africa, to make how that is facilitated, and because that's the only way to actually to get this to at the next level of allowing a greater awareness and greater commitment towards supporting ethical fashion.
Yeah. Well,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Adeyinka.
Yeah, so great stuff, Michael, and thanks, Leroy, for opening that kind of warms up, because I think it's led to this. In terms of, the intersection between AI and business, I was recently speaking with, so I do some work with entrepreneurs in Africa, and I tend to do some work with them on what I call frugal digital strategies, because we know that we have got some infrastructure gap in the space, but we've got to learn to make do with what we've got. And that's the entrepreneurial side of things. And you tend to discover that a lot of innovation comes out from continents and places like Africa because we do more with less. In the West, we have a lot, so we tend not to be as creative as we do in parts where we have less. And so we're forced to do more with less. And that being said, in terms of the intersection of AI or internet with fashion, one of the things I tend to say to emerging businesses is that, your business model is pretty much the way you create, deliver, and capture value. It's going to be three things: how you create the value for people. And remember, value creation has to be created because it's addressing a pain. And that's why we have a value proposition to your business. But then that means you have to understand your customer segments very well. And I'm going to address the behavioral side of things shortly. Then you have the value delivery, and then you have the value capture. Now, if you look at those three things I just said and mirror that back into Africa, you'll discover that nothing is stagnant anymore on the continent, in spite of all the infrastructural deficits that we've had so far. There are three big barriers that we tend to talk about when we look at how AI will penetrate into Africa, for example. One thing we know is that at least about half of the jobs on the continent are subject to automation. So if Industry 4.0 was to go a full blow move into Africa today, about 50% of jobs will be, kind of wiped off. But we know that's not going to happen because, we still have low wages and we still have issues of technology adoption. And so what we're discovering is that in terms of value creation, there is now a need, and what we're seeing with the emerging trends of millennials is that technology can be used or leveraged for a lot of things around customization and personalization. And so embedding that into your business, or creating a platform that allows people to customize their own wares and co-create their own designs is something that is huge. And that speaks to what Leroy was saying about independent designers as well, that it's now time for the fashionista and everyone to be unleashed, and technology is now giving people the power to do just that. And you doing that on your platform is giving power to the people. And you might think that there's a bigger deal to it, because what that does for you as a business is that it gives you the ability to watch and listen and see how trends are being created, and then you can continue to push trends in that direction. That's one thing. The other side of things is to look at how, this whole behavioral side of things. And whenever people talk about Africa, I get amazed, because what I see here is simple. Every trend I've looked at on Africa and studied over the past 3-5 years has never stayed on a zero. In 2003, about 2002, 2003, when we began what I call the second wave of digital economy and digital revolution sweeping across Africa. So it started in 95. The internet was made public for the first time, 6th of August, 1991. Before then, we've had it used in the military. Between 1991 and 1995, it made its way to Africa. It started off in South Africa, moved to Ghana, where we had the first tech hub created in 2001. And then we moved on to Nigeria, then we have Kenya, now we have Rwanda, we have Ivory Coast, where we have 90% mobile phone penetration. What we have discovered is that when you look at how all of these things speak to fashion, one thing is that at the moment on African continent, about 120 million people have access to financial mobile services. We have over 250 to 400 million mobile phones on the continent at the moment. We have about less than 1% of all trade happening online compared to China, that is 24%. And mark you, even though we have less than 1% of e-commerce in Africa going online, we have one of the major e-commerce organizations, Jumia, that has now become a unicorn, meaning a $1 billion company, off of less than 1% of the market share, pretty much. Now, this speaks to the fact that the continent is moving swiftly in that direction. And what I therefore would often say to tech entrepreneurs or to fashion entrepreneurs is that the fact that the wave of Industry 4.0 may not necessarily catch Africa up as quickly as it is, enveloping the West. What that can do to us is two things. We can choose to ignore it and say that, well, we will never get there, or we can choose to say, oh, this is going to give us a head start. And that's the way I think entrepreneurs should see this revolution, particularly those in Africa. We have a head start. The head start may not be for more than 5 years, because I was saying earlier, when we had the second wave of digital revolution, a young man started a company called IntoSwitch in Nigeria and said the modus operandi was to change payments to card payments. People thought the guy was crazy. 2 years later, 32 million payment transactions went through his card processing system. 32 million, just 2 years later. So even though we can say that behavior and trends seem to be a bit stagnant, what we know is that the moment a trend starts, it catches wildfire and it moves on, even in spite of infrastructural challenges. So a lot of opportunities there for entrepreneurs who are listening to us today.
Wonderful. With what you just said, Adeyinka, it was clear that indefinitely for, no matter if you're in sustainability and a sustainable, a brand that supports sustainability, at the end of the day, the fashion industry has to embrace e-commerce. And what's been incredibly impressive across Africa is that that because of the accessibility to mobile phones, and having that internet access, they've been able to be very much part of that revolution. And indeed, Africa has not been stagnant at all in dealing with the issue of sustainability. And it's been great to see that. Yet still, this brings me to the point of that for brands who are really championing sustainability, they're still having to find that there's affordability also becomes an issue. Whereby, for example, even if you're just being in terms of your clothes and whereby you're looking at the garment that is much more technologically, involved or part of that, part of the whole manufacturing process, whether it be your shirt change color because of the how hot the weather is outside, and so it regulates body temperature and all of that stuff. There's still issue of affordability. So I wanted to ask, because now Jennifer is on the continent, in Togo, on the continent. Terence is here in the UK. And I know that Terence, I've been down to the Never Fade factory workplace in Soho, and they're doing incredible work with technology. I just wanted to ask you, Jennifer, first, how you deal with the issue of affordability, because you mentioned about earlier about the fabric from turning dirt into actual fabric and all of that whole technological involvement in making that happen, and how you're able to deal with that affordability issue.
Oh, well, like I said, this is the journey has begun, and any small or medium-sized business would always agree that financial constraints tend to be part of the stage and the startup stage. So we have to make a conscious decision where we want to plow our investment, our money into, and then build around. So we have to create a story. We have to say, for example, one of the stories is dresses are made to become a long-term companion. Right? So we build a upcycled dress around this story that a dress is supposed to be your companion. And then we put it on like Africa Fashion Week, Nigeria, which I did. my first time of putting upcycled fabrics was on Africa Fashion Week Nigeria, and I really am so grateful that you allowed me to do that, because it was a new concept as well. And then also run the story in e-commerce to the audience that a dress is meant to be a companion, and the story behind it. Then you can put the price label, the right price, because you pay up the manufacturers, you pay living wages to your, and people can trace where the money goes, and there's transparency as well as traceability. You're a responsible brand. I find that some of my clothes were bought straight off the runway. They're one pieces, they were just picked up straight off the runway because there's a story. And so the fear of we're selling to a conscious consumer who knows that they're saving the planet, no longer fast fashion, no longer cheap fashion, and it's something that will stay with you. And we hope that if you keep it and keep it for a longer time, particularly artisanal clothing as well, that are made with the culture embedded in it. So you can keep it for a very long time. It tells a story. It can be handed down to someone else, and therefore you're ready to pay the price for that outfit because there's a story. Not a fool. The consumer is ready to pay that price, and you're more suspicious. Your own consumer will be more suspicious if it's really cheap. So what is cheap? So I do sell off the runway. I sold off the runway of Africa Fashion Week Nigeria, and when I did the same runway, another upcycled show in Lome, I had the embassies, the embassies asking just before COVID, we want to run upcycled shows in our embassy. We want to put I was featured on France 24. The customer wants the clothes because the story is there. And it just takes a bit of courage to go through, put your investment there. I mean, I had to relocate my investments from marketing budgets or take it away from other areas that I had intended on using it and be bold. But I built a customer that can pay. And I'm hoping that this kind of platform, talking here, will also speaking to the customer. You're paying up, you're being part of this, saving this environment. It's no longer just fast fashion. It's a dress that can be a long-time companion, an outfit that can be a companion, an outfit that has a story, and we can pay the right price for that.
Absolutely, Jennifer. I love what you just said about for the customer, the consumer, because there's, as Adeyinka had mentioned before, about when you look at the supply chain, the customer has a responsibility. Fast fashion would not exist if there weren't people there buying these clothes, and that's very important. If there wasn't a market there for it, there wouldn't be there. And as Anna Wintour mentioned in that interview with Naomi Campbell, that was featured, Naomi Campbell, No Filters, she said that right now people have lost, even the big brands have lost focus of the value, the story, the creativity is, and it's time for, this one thing this has shown us, this COVID crisis, is that we have to stop the extravagance. We have seen the impact, just the lockdown that it's had on the environment. What it's had on the environment has been incredible. And so it's so important to, to recognize that we have to stop being so extravagant and really understand the impact that it has on countries, like the continent of Africa and other parts of the world in developing countries. I want to bring that question to you also, Terence, in terms of affordability, because I do know that for you, you do a lot of incredible stuff with, immersive sort of technology and fashion. So tell us more about how you deal with the issue of affordability.
Well, at the moment, we're a physical location in a very expensive building in probably the second most expensive area in London, probably per square foot even in Europe. So then we've constantly had to be creative when it comes to customers to cover our bills as well, because fashion fluctuates, trends fluctuate, so you cannot really do hardcore budgeting in terms of revenue raise by going through necessarily, let's say, graphs for consumer behavior. But what is a sure strategy to make sure that your graph can be stronger is when you build a loyal customer base, in this case, by following a trend where consumers want to be more participatory in the production of their garments, which is definitely a fashion sustainability solution. So most of the customers that are coming in start getting curious about personalizing or customizing clothes, because we do live painting in the space to upcycle garments, but I also have 3 sewing machines. So on any given day, I have at least one designer that's already making stuff either for their brand or personalizing for a customer. So in terms of affordability, then it makes the job a bit easier, because you can have conversation with customers and create some kind of analysis into, you know, what the price scale is. I know, for example, that if I get a military vintage jacket, let's say, for example, I get it for 45 pounds. I have numerous customers who will buy from me either online or in the physical store if I keep my costs and then eventually sell price at around 250 pounds. I know it would sell, but that's because I've studied the consumer behavior over a period of 3 years to know that when I've tried to put that same piece, same amount of effort at 1,000 pounds, I've sold less. I've sold, but I've sold less units. So the idea of trying to keep the fashion fun, trying to keep it creative, innovative, and moving forward without necessarily making it unaffordable for the consumer, but also using it as a marketing tool to become a destination, was always also built into the business from our inception. We knew that the only way we would survive in Soho is by not trying to compete with brands like Supreme, like Palace, Machine A, that are household names when it comes to fashion, that spend usually $100 million on marketing, but to create a space where customers can come and feel like they're part of the creative process. And then when you look at implements or tools such as augmented reality, virtual reality, potentially down the line, even hologram technology, which we're playing with at the moment as well, you find that customization then can be done online and offline, and then you can create better budgets around how you scale that. And in my case, I'm incubating at least 8 other brands. So whatever philosophy that I have in terms of creating a success around Never Fade Factory is indirectly the success of these other 8 brands that I'm carrying, which brings us to the other issue where keeping affordability for me also means that I'm all about collaboration. I have not created any piece of my brand in the last 2 years which was not a collaborative effort with another designer, another brand. And that in itself is also it's also becoming a destination element, because customers and consumers are actually now looking for brands that are collaborating. They don't want to buy something just from one direction anymore. They want to buy something which they feel like, you know, 2 different brands collaborated on. These are all really easy solutions for fashion and sustainability to implement. We're doing so within our environment, and then we're linking up with other communities, whether it be in Moscow, in Tokyo, et cetera, to build that up. And then that becomes another conversation like Chris has had earlier, where there's a strong element of skill transfer. Because you also have a few designers that are not necessarily clued up on the new opportunities where they can scale their creativity to get more business. And if within our space, we become a transfer skills or knowledge transfer center for encouraging those designers that have fallen behind the new trends, that helps us also keep other brands producing limited items at a reasonable cost, because they know they have a consumer market, they have a ready-made commercial platform to sell their goods. And this is the entire experiment that we're playing around with.
Thank you, Terence. So, you know, when it comes to, as Terence and Jennifer rightfully mentioned about affordability, that a couple of things that was very important, couple of points very important there, is that for lots of brands, affordability is a big issue when it comes to brands who main focus is sustainability. And the best way to deal with a lot of that affordability, first, as Jennifer mentioned, know exactly where you're going to invest your money. So while there is an element of embracing the internet in order to facilitate and attract consumer, by understanding consumer behavior through the support of artificial intelligence, you do realize that in order to facilitate to get the benefit of e-commerce, brands who are trying to sustain themselves, one of the best way to do so is through collaboration, as Terence said, and that is truly the way forward, even for companies, fashion companies, or in Africa, I think that's a huge challenge for them. Chris, I saw you shaking your head a little earlier about something caught your attention on that was said earlier. If you remember what that is, do you mind commenting? 1 second, Chris, 1 second. Okay. There you go.
I'm shaking my head, one, because I'm learning so much from everyone on this call, but I think I think there's a really amazing convergence opportunity between what we're talking about, which is, I'm going to just go back to one reference to Pakistan, which is, I was always so impressed when I went to Pakistan that even in the factories I went to, every product that came out had a little bit of sort of a defect. You know, they could never really get the standard perfect. So in a way, the mass-produced objects always looked a little bit handmade. But if you matched handmade with customization and personalization in a kind of new supply chain idea, which is based on consumer, let's say, desires, you know, to have their own personalized garment or whatever, you know, product that they want. There's something amazing about sort of the supply chain, the factory, that allows on demand to transform something that's mass produced to be something that customized, that Terence is talking about, and maybe even go through a combination of upcycling, adaptation, and customization in a way that really is the creative process that I think Lenny is also talking about in terms of creating, you know, unique identities and kind of media experiences and realities that come out of it. So that what the key word was, I think, the customization and the personalization is what people are really going to want, I think, now. And they want something that's made for them, but it's not expensive. So I think the combination of raw materials, recycling, personalization, adding, and collaboration, which everyone spoke about, is really is so rich. And Africa tapestry of kind of design aesthetics could be really, you know, pioneering to express that kind of, I think really is a tapestry of you know, culture, experiences, and richness that's missing in mass-produced and Western products that don't have that beauty.
Yes.
So I would like to work on this project with everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Leroy, I know you wanted to say something also, because I see you over there. I can read your mind. I can read your mind.
That was ages ago. No.
Well, in terms of, because I do know for you know, your company, you do right now, you've been focusing mainly on the technology side of things. And while I don't want you to go too deep into it, but I do want you to get the opportunity to tell about a little bit more about what your company is doing in supporting the fashion industry in moving forward,
right,
in embracing technology. But without going too deep into it, not too deep into it yet.
No, I won't. Don't worry.
The reason why that is,
I promise.
because we have some wonderful surprises coming up, and so
yes,
you know.
Yeah, we do indeed. Well, what we're doing is okay. Let me start from another angle. We were going to launch a new type of format show in February next year, okay, where we're going to be using live 360 streaming, okay, in regards to, you know, filming graduates, new graduates, and the generation stroke millennial. Our network in regards to the fashion industry through social media is quite strong. So basically, we were going to utilize the Facebook groups that we were on, the LinkedIn groups that we're on. We're going to be live broadcasting through, you know, Instagram TV and through kind of like Facebook, through our own platform, and obviously through LinkedIn. So basically, we were going to have a massive experiment about how with 360 live streaming do within a fashion environment. So, yes, it's okay. Yeah, so, you know, that's what we are going to be doing. But the thing is, because of what's happened now, okay, we've had to look at it completely different now. Even though we can still live stream, we don't need an audience, because we're actually going to be filming live to an audience. Okay, so basically, you know, when you're dealing with technology, your first point of call is your marketing plan has to be really good. It has to be really, really good. And that's where you talk about collaboration. Okay, if you've got, you know, 6 or 7, 8, 9, 10 designers that are working in a group, okay, you collaborate, you share your social media, you stream through their social media, you get that kind of message out there that I was speaking about before, okay, then that will create a community. Okay, and basically in regards to then getting that to a wider audience, because you're linked up to different groups, you're linked up to different kind of like media partners, you're linked up to all different groups, and all this is done digitally. So it's not having to go out there. You don't have to kind of rely on your buyers from China, your buyers from Japan or the States to come and fly over to London and see your show. It's the fact it is, you know, use technology. It's there. So, you know, if you're going to be broadcasting your show live, then you let everybody know I'm broadcasting live at 3 o'clock on Saturday during the Fashion Week. That's it, done. So it's kind of like, it's how you put it across. It's your marketing plan that is going to be so important, and also the collaborative element. Because like, as someone said earlier on, you can't build Rome in a day, okay? You can't do it on your own. And I can't express collaboration so much. It's so important. From now on, it is so important, because basically at the end of the day, things have changed. I've realized again, I'm going to repeat myself again, I didn't get to this point doing it on my own. Okay, that is for sure. And, you know, I've got to thank those that have been with me through all this journey. But without them, the collaborative elements and the skill set that I needed to get to where I am, I wouldn't have got where I am today. And that's all through collaborating with, you know, some good technology companies like Target 3D. There's quite a few that I'm working with at this present moment in time. But like I'm saying to you, collaboration, look at your business model, because that has to change. Okay, look at how you're going to put your message across if you're going to go online. And my personal thing is, you need to get into technology. That's all I can say to all the entrepreneurs, all the kind of like, you know, the freelancers, all the independent fashion designers. I mean, you know, learn about technology. It's going to be a major factor to the way you go forward.
Excellent. And that sums it all up there, guys. I mean, we're now just in wrapping everything up. I mean, I hope the audience, and I hope the designers out there, and I hope the companies who are supporting designers and the funding streams that are out there who want to support, you know, brands and companies and fashion brands that are really committed to really being, you know, socially responsible, that you see that there is a viable market out there, that one that is actually growing, that's growing quite rapidly also. And I hope that you've, that the audience and everyone else who's viewing and listening in also will see that the experts here have shown that there is a very important point, that we have to be more environmentally friendly. We have to make sure that our business plan embraces the new change and be as current in order to actually survive. But understanding in that survival that you have to collaborate also. Understanding that through that supply chain, that it needs to be, while at times there is the issue of affordability and the issue of there's several different other sort of systems there or hurdles there that might cause some obstacles and not to flow as easily, yet still there's a supply chain. Then that supply chain, the manufacturer has a responsibility and the consumer has a responsibility. So whether you're buying expensive brands or you're buying from the high street, and you know, there is a responsibility there to ensure that you understand the value of what is being produced, you understand the story behind that, and you understand how it's going to contribute to ensuring that your environment, both in the environment where you live, but and the you know, the country you live, but the world, the impact it has on the world is very, very important. I want to thank all of you for all you panelists for being here today and sharing your knowledge and your passion for sustainability and ethics. And audience, I want to thank you all for tuning in also. Wait a minute, I see a question. Bear me 1 second. Sorry, bear me 1 second. Oh, someone just asked, will this be available to watch again? Of course it will be. Right now we're live stream on Facebook. As soon as this web talk is finished, we actually have the recorded version, and we leave it on all our social media platforms, on Facebook, primarily on Facebook, and on YouTube. You will see some promotion for this web talk in Instagram, and it will give you a link that directs you to Facebook and also to YouTube. One more thing, panelists. Someone wanted to say this to you guys. This has been such an eye-opening discussion, especially as someone who is starting a brand. So they wanted to say thank you to all of you guys for that also. So yes, once again, thank you all so much for being here, for taking the time out on this beautiful sunny afternoon. Jennifer, thank you for really, even though that the internet is so temperamental, you've been so tenacious in ensuring that you stay online and connected with us.
I know. It wasn't easy.
You know,
off and on.
You've been on it. You've been right on it. Terrence, you are obviously enjoying that sunshine. You're getting your nurture. I mean, you get. Thanks to us, Terrence, you're getting extra dose of vitamin D over there, which is very important.
That's correct.
So all of you, thank you so very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to talking more. Oh, before I go, I almost forgot. There is something very important that the Africa Fashion Week London is doing. And before I go into telling you all about that, in showing our commitment to sustainability and ethics, guys, we are working with Parsons School of Design and Henley Business School in producing an amazing course, which Christopher Kirwan will tell you more about now.
Well, actually, Leroy, sorry, I did say Lenny for somehow, but my eyes were a little bit blurry there from staring at the screen all day. But I think what you said are three words that are the most amazing for me, is fashion as connectivity, communication, and collaboration. I think we're going to be talking about how technology is transforming fashion in every aspect, from fashion as communication as brand, to fashion as connectivity in terms of how you market and distribute your brand and your products across the Internet of Things as a platform, and collaboration as co-working, collaboration, co-creation, all of the new trends that I think that Adeyinka will address in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship that will be part of it. So we're going to provide theory, and we're going to provide case studies, and we're going to provide kind of a workshop format, depending on how many people we get. We're still trying to work that out because we want to have it to do some hands-on kinds of makings. We call kind of rapid prototyping concepts, to present your ideas and to have a chance to get your ideas in a way juried. We hope that we can get to that stage through the project.
Thank you. So guys, for the audience and everyone tuning in, this is a course, an online course. The title of it is actually Fashion Futures. And there is a subtitle also, which I've kind of forgotten right now, but because I don't want to mess it up, if you will find all of this through our link at Africa Fashion Week London. It's going to be launched next Monday. And this is in collaboration with Henley Business School and Parsons School of Design. It will teach you everything that has to do with embracing how to take your business. So this is not it's not a business course 101 or fashion 101. It's really for people who've actually started in their actual career already and want to go to the next level in understanding both the theory and the practicality and the practical, and embracing the ethical side of business also. And the importance of embracing technology in doing so. So this is going to be launched next Monday. It's an online course in partnership with Parsons School of Design and Henley Business School. You can connect and register on via Africa Fashion Week London. It's part of our Africa Fashion Week online program that is only going to get better because we have these wonderful partnerships with these two incredible institutions, and we're very, very proud of that. So please register. It's next Monday. The launch is next Monday. Jump in line. You also have the opportunity to send emails for any sort of inquiries that you may have, and we'll be ready to answer those questions. All right. So once again, thank you all so very much. Have a lovely afternoon. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow for another web talk. And it's going to be all about hair and self-love, identity, how to take care of your hair. You don't want to miss it. All right. Have a lovely afternoon, everybody. Thank you, panelists, so much for being here. We appreciate you guys so much. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.